Good morning and welcome to breakfast. As you can see, I'm just finishing this morning and I hope you're enjoying yours as well. I am Pastor Sarah Gorman. I am the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Marion, and I am honored to be with you all this morning in an unconventional way, but yet here we are. I figured since I'm new to the area, I've only been here 6 months, I would share my call story and kind of what led me to this place. So we're going to back up to when I was born. I was born and raised in the Lutheran Church in California, and at 3 months was baptized. Attended Sunday school all the time, went through confirmation, didn't exactly love every minute of it, but made it through. I was confirmed the fall of my 9th grade year, and I was involved in youth group starting around then because youth group was a high school thing, and so I started joining all the different events and I'd go on the trips and different things that happened. And when I was it was the summer between 9th and 10th grade, I was doing a project with my Girl Scout troop that was also a religious project, and it's called God and Life, and a lot of it revolved around how my faith would exist in my life outside of the church. And so with that, I found a mentor, which happened to be my youth pastor, and we met week after week throughout the summer going through this program and talking through what this looks like. And in the process, there was a final project, and they suggested, well, why don't you serve at the food bank or help with youth group, which were things I was already doing. And at the time, we had just gotten a new pastor, and he wanted to start a sermon series on the book of Acts. Well, that whole Bible study that summer, the whole project I was working towards was focused on Acts chapter 9. And so my youth pastor said, yeah, we'll preach that week. And I, not knowing what I was getting into, said yes. And so there I was, the fall of my 10th grade year, preaching in front of the whole church, which was something that hadn't happened before outside of a youth-led worship service. And so I was anxious, I was nervous, I had no idea what I was doing or why I said yes. But in the midst of it, when it came time to preach at the early service, I felt a sense of calm. I don't know how else to explain it other than everything just kind of felt right. I wasn't nervous anymore. I found people in the congregation that I could look to and smile at because I knew that they loved me no matter what. And so then when it came for the second sermon during the second service, I loved every minute of it. I was energized. I couldn't imagine doing something different, and my pastors saw that too. And so that was kind of the first time I really felt called to ministry. So I got more involved in youth group and more involved in the church, and helped plan VBS and helped teach Sunday school because just leading the songs wasn't enough. And I decided when it was time to pick a college that I was going to go to a small Christian college in my hometown. I wasn't quite ready to move away. And with it being a Christian college, there were a certain number of Bible classes that were necessary, but I went in with the intention of being an elementary school teacher. That was something that I always wanted to do. It was something that my mom did and kind of just made sense for me. I love kids and I love teaching, and that just seemed to be a pretty natural fit. So I went to school. It's called Fresno Pacific University. It's a little Mennonite Brethren school that hardly ever makes the map. And started taking my classes, taking the prerequisites, taking the general ed classes, and taking those Bible classes. And it was during those Bible classes that I really found that I enjoyed what we were talking about. Talking through some of the Old Testament books weren't as boring as I thought it would be. It was actually kind of interesting to find patterns and to find relationships and to find different things that were going on throughout these different books. And so I did the math. I kind of searched it out and found that I could actually double major at FPU and still graduate on time. There was enough overlap between the elementary education major and something that called Contemporary Christian Ministries, which is kind of like a youth ministry focus. And so I double majored. And one of the classes for that youth ministry major was to hold a discernment group. And what that was people gathered from my life from different parts of life. And so my mom came, which surprised me. My home church pastor came. The pastor that I was working with at the time as their youth director came. Some of my best friends from different parts of life came. My boyfriend at the time came. And my confirmation mentor came, in addition to a couple of my seminary professors. And in that circle, we talked about what did they see God was calling me to? Because being called to ministry isn't just something that happens internally. It's also something that others around you can see. And so each of these people around the circle shared what they saw my gifts and talents were and how that could serve the church. And it was kind of an eye-opening. At that point, I was really still focused on being an elementary education teacher, thinking maybe I could be a youth director in my spare time or volunteer with a youth group or do something in that way so that everything was kind of filling all the buckets that I needed to be filled. But during that discernment group, it was made very clear to me that not only was this something that I had felt back in 10th grade, but it was something that others had seen in me and something that I needed to act upon. And so I started looking for seminaries. And being an ELCA Lutheran, there's a candidacy process that I got involved with, which is a lot of paperwork and a lot of conversations. And along the way, the requirement was for me to attend seminary in person for a year, at least a year, which doesn't seem like a big deal. But this California girl who grew up in the same house that her parents still live in and went to college just across town couldn't imagine moving away. And while there was a seminary in California, it just didn't feel right. I felt like if it was time to go to school, it was time to go to school. And so I applied to Luther Seminary, start in St. Paul, Minnesota, with the intention of being an online student, but some doors opened along the way, definitely God at work, and I was offered a full tuition scholarship if I attended school in person. And so, having never lived anywhere where it snowed, I committed to moving to St. Paul, Minnesota. And I wish it was that easy. But that summer, well, actually just before I graduated college, 2 weeks prior, my mom had an incident and collapsed while at Costco. I was with my boyfriend's family. We had just done a color run where they throw colored cornstarch at you as you go through a 5K course, and had just gotten home, and I got a call that I never thought I'd get when I was in my 20s. My dad called me, and I could hear the sirens in the background, and he said, "You better come to the hospital. Mom collapsed." And in that moment, I didn't know what to do. They took me to the hospital because I wasn't in any state to drive. And it was there that life really changed for me. My mom had to fight for her life, and there was a lot of complications with it, and we got to know the ICU nurses very well over the next couple weeks, and the hospital staff very well over the next month. And every time we thought we were in the clear, something else happened. And so during that time, I was getting ready to graduate from college, and actually got ready to graduate in my mom's hospital room. Not something I imagined I'd ever do. And I had kind of internally decided I was going to stay home from seminary, at least that fall, that I was going to stay home with my family and help take care of my mom, because that's what needed to happen. But Mom told me very directly that no, this is what you're supposed to do, and you're supposed to go. Again, God working through others to help me hear that call. And that was a big thing to hear that from my mom, because she was always in favor of me being a teacher. It was a stable job. It was predictable. You kind of knew what you were getting into. And being a pastor, each day is different. So for her to give that blessing, I knew I had to go. So over that summer, in between Mom's doctor's appointments, in between my dad and brother and I trying to figure out what was next, I bought a car that would be all-wheel drive so that it would work well in the snow. Mind you, I'd never driven in the snow yet. I packed up my car and I moved to Minnesota with my best friend. She came along on the road trip with me and helped me move into my dorm room, my first Minnesota address. And so I took classes, made friends, went through CPL, which is a contextual Christian public leader class where you serve in a church or nonprofit to kind of learn what other people are doing. And then I had CPE, which is clinical pastoral education, which is essentially chaplaincy at the hospital. And as I was doing that, my grandmother died, and that was life-altering. Just a year prior, my mom had been in the hospital, and then my grandma was in the hospital. And it was the same hospital and similar nurses, and there was a lot of overlap, and all I wanted to do was be home with my family. And so after rearranging schedules, after buying a plane ticket that was far more than I ever thought I'd pay, I was headed home to be with my family for the last 48 hours of my grandmother's life. And then I returned to CPE, only to work with families who were dealing with the same kind of stuff that I was dealing with. And so I got it. I got their anger, I got their frustration, I got the uncertainty and the terror, and it was all too real. So I finished up CPE that summer, just a couple weeks later, continued with a year of classes, did a year of internship in rural Minnesota with 8 different churches and 7 different pastors working at those churches. It was a great experience, and if anything, it taught me that you never know what it's going to look like. I returned from internship to another year of classes. Mind you, this Master of Divinity program is a 4-year program. Now they're working to make it shorter, and they're working to figure out how to integrate different parts, but it was a 30 credit program where each class was a credit. So unlike other master's programs where classes are 3 or 4 credits each, this was a little different. So during that final year, I filled out some paperwork. We had gotten married that year. And so my husband and I were filling out these papers trying to say where we were willing to go as a pastor and pastor spouse. And we didn't know what would result in filling out those papers. And so we filled them out the best we could, kind of saying we're not really ready to go to the deep south, but I guess anywhere else we could figure out how to make that work. And I got assigned to Region 5, which is Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois, I think, and Upper Michigan, the UP of Michigan. And so, all right, we had a better idea of where we were going. And the next day I got a call from Bishop Mansholt, the former Bishop Mansholt, who said, I was chosen, I was recruited, I was called to this East Central Synod of Wisconsin. And so from there, there's a huge process of looking at church paperwork, looking at my gifts and skills, and trying to figure out where I best fit in the community that I best fit in. And so here I am 6 months after starting, and it has not looked like I imagined. It has been a wild 6 months. It has been an emotional 6 months, but it's exactly where I'm supposed to be. And so I'm excited to be here in the community of Marion. I'm excited to be a pastor finally. It seems unreal in a lot of ways. I'm excited to be living out in Wisconsin with a Wisconsin address. Never did I think that would happen. And I'm excited to see where God is calling us, where God is calling each of us and us as a community in our world. Thanks for joining me this morning. Thanks for eating your breakfast or your lunch or dinner alongside me. And thanks for being the community of Marion. You are the people that make this feel like home.